Have you ever felt the weight of a secret so heavy it could change everything? That's exactly the kind of storm Emily found herself in. A young girl standing in a courtroom, her voice trembling but unwavering as she pointed at the man she once called Dad. The words she spoke next sent shockwaves through the room. He lied. In an instant, a lifetime of hidden truths unraveled, exposing a betrayal so profound it left everyone speechless. But what could drive a daughter to accuse her father in front of strangers, to pull back the curtain on a painful reality? This wasn't just a fight for freedom. It was a fight for justice, for courage, for a life stolen by manipulation and greed. Emily's story is one that will tug at your heartstrings, make you question everything, and remind you of the unyielding power of truth. Stay with us as we unravel the layers of this emotional story, a tale of loss, resilience, and a young girl's inspiring stand against all odds. Her courage didn't just expose her father's lies. It ignited a spark of hope for anyone who's ever felt silenced. What she revealed in that courtroom wasn't just her story. It was a reminder that empathy and compassion can shine through, even in the darkest corners of life. Life has a way of striking when we least expect it. Emily's world, once painted in warm hues of laughter and love, was shattered in an instant. The car accident that claimed her mother, Laura, didn't just steal a life. It stole the heart of their home. Days turned into a blur of silence, each one colder than the last, as Emily struggled to find meaning in a house that no longer felt like hers. It was as if the warmth that defined her life had vanished alongside Laura. Grief isn't just about tears. It's about the gaping void left behind. For Emily, that void was unrelenting. Her father, James, seemed like a stranger in the wake of the tragedy, his presence more intimidating than comforting. Emily, once a carefree girl, now spent her days clutching at memories that felt like sand slipping through her fingers. She needed compassion, yet what she received was indifference, leaving her spiraling into a lonely abyss. James's reaction to Laura's death was not what anyone expected. Instead of embracing his daughter, he retreated into himself. Conversations turned to commands, and affection gave way to icy stares. Emily couldn't comprehend why the man who had once carried her on his shoulders now seemed incapable of even looking her in the eye. It was as though grief had transformed him into someone unrecognizable. Every corner of their home whispered Laura's name, yet James refused to acknowledge it. Emily's pleas to talk about her mother were met with a dismissive wave or a stern glare. Over time, Emily stopped asking, burying her feelings deep inside. It was a survival mechanism in a house where emotions had become a forbidden language. She longed for empathy but found none. Emily's days became a routine of silent breakfasts and empty evenings. She yearned for the days when Laura's laughter would echo through the halls or when family dinners were filled with stories and jokes. Now, the dining table felt like a courtroom, with James as the stoic judge. Every attempt at conversation was shut down, leaving Emily to navigate her grief alone. The nights were the hardest. Emily would lie awake, clutching a photo of her mother, tears streaming down her face. She would replay memories in her mind, desperate to hold on to every detail before they faded away. It was during these moments that she felt the weight of her father's emotional absence the most. The house was full of shadows, but none cast as dark as James's indifference. Emily often wondered if her father blamed her for Laura's death. The thought haunted her, twisting the knife of guilt deeper into her heart. She wanted to ask him, to confront the silent tension that filled their home, but fear held her back. What if the answer confirmed her worst fears? It was a question she wasn't ready to face, not yet. Though the house was cold, Emily's heart still carried a flicker of hope. She clung to the belief that something or someone would come to her rescue. She didn't know when or how, but deep down, she yearned for the day when she wouldn't feel so alone. It was this quiet hope that kept her going, even as her world seemed to crumble around her. James wasn't always this way. Emily remembered a time when his hugs felt like a fortress, when his laughter would bounce off the walls of their home. But grief has a way of changing people, sometimes turning love into stone. After Laura's death, James became a man of few words and even fewer smiles. It was as though he had built a wall around himself, leaving Emily on the other side, desperate for a connection. Days with James felt like walking on thin ice. His demeanor was cold, and his words, though sparse, were sharp enough to sting. Emily found herself shrinking in his presence, her once vibrant personality now dimmed by the oppressive air he carried. He wasn't violent, but his indifference cut deeper than any outburst could. It left her questioning if she was invisible, or worse, if he simply didn't care. Every time Emily tried to reach out, her efforts were met with rejection. She would leave notes on the kitchen counter, small reminders of shared memories or questions about her day, only to find them ignored or crumpled in the trash. James wasn't just distant. He seemed determined to erase any trace of the warmth that Laura had brought into their lives. Emily began to internalize his behavior, wondering if there was something wrong with her. Was she unworthy of his love? Or was his coldness a punishment for something she couldn't understand? This self-doubt planted seeds of insecurity that would take years to uproot. What Emily needed was courage, to stand tall in the face of his indifference. But at that moment, all she felt was small. James's avoidance of anything related to Laura became a silent rule in the house. Emily was forbidden from mentioning her mother's name, and any reminders of her. Photos, keepsakes, even her favorite recipes, were tucked away or discarded. The home, once filled with Laura's vibrant energy, now felt like a museum of what used to be. And James, the curator, ensured no one lingered too long on the past. On rare occasions, James's mask would slip, revealing glimpses of the man he used to be. A stray tear during a quiet moment, or a hesitant glance at an old family photo, hinted at a grief he refused to share. But these moments were fleeting, quickly buried under his stoic facade. For Emily, these glimpses were both a source of hope and heartache, a reminder of what was lost. The weight of James's indifference began to take a toll on Emily's spirit. School became her refuge, a place where she could escape the oppressive silence of home. Yet, even there, the shadow of her father's coldness followed her. Teachers and friends noticed her withdrawn demeanor, but no one dared to ask too many questions. Emily carried her pain alone, a silent burden too heavy for her young shoulders. Despite everything, Emily refused to give up on her father. She held on to the belief that the man who had once been her hero was still somewhere inside. She wanted to believe that compassion could break through his icy exterior, that the love they once shared wasn't entirely lost. And though James's coldness felt like an impenetrable barrier, Emily's hope refused to be extinguished. Margaret had always been a pillar of strength in Emily's life, a steady presence even in the most turbulent times. When Laura passed away, Margaret knew her granddaughter needed more than just kind words and sympathy. She needed action. Watching Emily's light dim under James's care broke her heart, and she knew she couldn't stand idly by. Though her own grief was raw, Margaret's compassion for Emily fueled her resolve. It wasn't easy for Margaret to intervene. She was stepping into a storm of family tension, and James's cold demeanor made her hesitant. But every time she saw Emily's quiet tears or heard her voice falter, Margaret's determination grew stronger. She wasn't just fighting for custody. She was fighting for Emily's chance to heal, to rediscover the joy that had been stolen from her. Margaret began documenting everything: Emily's withdrawn behavior, James's emotional neglect, and the stifling atmosphere of their home. She knew that building a case for custody would be an uphill battle, especially against someone as controlling as James. But Margaret was no stranger to hardship. Her courage, born from years of life's trials, became the anchor that kept her steady. Financially, Margaret was not in the best position. She lived modestly, relying on her pension to make ends meet. Yet, the thought of letting Emily endure another day in James's care made her sacrifices feel small. Margaret sought help from local legal aid, pouring her limited resources into building a case that could protect Emily. Every dollar spent was a step closer to giving her granddaughter a safer home. Margaret also made sure to be a constant source of empathy for Emily. She didn't just listen. She validated every emotion, creating a safe space for her granddaughter to express her pain. Margaret's wisdom shone in these moments, as she shared stories of resilience and courage from her own past. Her goal wasn't just to rescue Emily, it was to empower her. The legal process was grueling, filled with delays and uncertainties. Margaret often doubted herself, questioning whether she was strong enough to see it through. But every time she looked into Emily's eyes, she found the inspiration she needed to keep going. Margaret wasn't just fighting for custody. She was fighting for hope, for a future where Emily could thrive. Friends and neighbors began to rally around Margaret, offering emotional and sometimes financial support. They saw the lengths to which she was going to protect her granddaughter and were moved by her determination. Margaret's courage inspired others to step forward, proving that compassion can ripple outward, touching lives beyond those directly involved. As the custody battle approached its climax, Margaret prepared herself for the possibility of failure. But even in her darkest moments, she refused to let doubt overshadow her love for Emily. Margaret knew that whether or not the court ruled in her favor, her granddaughter would always know one thing: she was deeply, unconditionally loved. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension as Emily took the stand. At just 15, her presence commanded a silence that even seasoned lawyers couldn't ignore. She gripped the edge of the witness stand, her voice trembling but resolute. Emily had decided to share the truth, a truth that had lived in shadows for far too long. What she revealed next would leave everyone in the room stunned. As Emily began to speak, she painted a picture of a life far removed from the one her father, James, had presented. She described his manipulation, his cold indifference, and the suffocating loneliness she had endured. But the weight of her testimony came when she accused James of something unthinkable: his role in her mother's death. The words hung in the air, each one cutting like a blade. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as Emily recounted the day of the accident. She revealed chilling details about James's insistence on Laura's life insurance policy just weeks before her tragic death. It wasn't just neglect, it was premeditated greed. Emily's courage to confront her father publicly was both heart-wrenching and inspiring, a testament to her strength in the face of fear. James's composure began to crack under the weight of Emily's words. The mask of indifference he had worn for years was slipping, revealing glimpses of guilt and panic. His lawyers scrambled to counter her testimony, but the damage was done. Emily's story had shifted the narrative entirely, making it clear that this was more than a custody battle. It was a fight for justice. Margaret sat in the gallery, tears streaming down her face as she listened to her granddaughter's testimony. She had always known James was hiding something, but hearing Emily's bravery left her speechless. Margaret's heart swelled with pride and sorrow, knowing the immense courage it took for Emily to speak her truth in front of a room full of strangers. The judge's expression remained stoic, but the gravity of Emily's words was unmistakable. Her testimony had not only exposed James's neglect, but had also unraveled a web of lies he had meticulously crafted. Emily's courage forced the court to see the man behind the facade, a father who had prioritized wealth over his own daughter's well-being. For James, the courtroom became a battlefield he was rapidly losing. His once ironclad defense was now riddled with cracks, each one a result of Emily's unwavering resolve. The whispers among the audience grew louder, their judgment palpable. James, once a figure of authority, now stood as a man stripped of credibility, his true motives laid bare for all to see. As Emily stepped down from the stand, the room erupted in murmurs. She had done what many adults could never bring themselves to do. She faced her abuser and demanded accountability. But even as she walked back to her seat, her eyes betrayed a mix of emotions: relief, fear, and an unspoken hope that the truth would finally set her free. The courtroom ruling felt like a breath of fresh air after years of suffocating under James's control. The judge's decision to grant custody to Margaret marked the beginning of a new chapter for Emily. As the gavel fell, it was as though the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in years, Emily saw a glimmer of hope, her chance to rebuild the life she had almost lost. Moving into Margaret's cozy home was like stepping into a different world. Gone were the cold, sterile walls of James's house, replaced by warm colors, family photos, and the comforting scent of fresh-baked cookies. Margaret made it her mission to create an environment where Emily could feel safe and loved. It wasn't just a house, it was a sanctuary, a place where healing could begin. At first, Emily struggled to adjust to her new life. Years of neglect had left her guarded, unsure of how to accept the kindness Margaret offered so freely. But Margaret, with her boundless patience and unwavering empathy, never gave up. She understood that healing wasn't linear, that Emily's courage to trust again would take time. And slowly but surely, the walls Emily had built around her heart began to crumble. Margaret encouraged Emily to express herself in ways she never could under James's care. Journaling became a nightly ritual, a space where Emily could pour out her thoughts without fear of judgment. Margaret also introduced her to art therapy, where Emily discovered a newfound passion for painting. With every brushstroke, Emily began to process her pain, transforming it into something beautiful and inspiring. School became a brighter place for Emily as well. No longer burdened by the oppressive atmosphere at home, she began to thrive academically and socially. Her teachers noticed a spark in her that hadn't been there before, and her classmates welcomed her into their circles with open arms. For the first time, Emily felt like she belonged, like she was part of something bigger than herself. Margaret, too, found her own healing through caring for Emily. The bond they shared became a source of strength for both of them, proof that love could mend even the deepest wounds. Margaret often marveled at Emily's resilience, her ability to find courage in the face of adversity. Their journey together was a testament to the power of compassion, and it inspired everyone around them. As months turned into years, Emily began to envision a future filled with possibilities. She dreamed of becoming an advocate for children who, like her, had faced neglect and abuse. Emily's story became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is light to be found. Her courage and determination inspired those around her to confront their own struggles with renewed strength. Though the scars of her past would never completely fade, Emily learned to wear them as badges of honor. They were a testament to her resilience, to the battles she had fought and won. And while the journey ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, Emily knew one thing for certain: she was no longer alone. With Margaret by her side, she could face anything the world threw her way.